This is Paul Levine, an incredible human being, one of our teachers in training, and who's been responsible for making this, what's it called? Hybrid work. A fellow came to visit from another city actually recently, and he visits a lot of different congregations. And he said that ours was one of 2 or 3 that he had come across where the hybrid actually worked. And that's because of Paul. So the restrooms are out there and to the left. We looked into putting restrooms in that direction when we remodeled, but $70,000 was a bit beyond our budget. If you have an extra 70 grand, you could have your name over it. The schedule for this morning is I'm going to do a little more talking, and then we'll do a guided meditation. And then after that, Jim Dalton. This is the Ho Chi Minh from Sichuan province in China. Will lead in some incredibly fine present moment movement. And then I will give a Dharma talk. And you're not allowed to leave before the Dharma. After that, there's the after party in there where there's tea and coffee and fine people to meet. There, that's it. Okay. And just to make it really obvious, everybody's welcome here. We're a predominantly white group, but let's look beyond that. Let's look into the hearts of each being here. Maybe we do it to ourselves and realize the Dharma is not limited. What the Buddha, I will acknowledge Vic. Vic, what's Vic's last name? How silly. Vic Ananta, who's on our board and one of our teachers in training. We were talking about how to welcome people and welcome everybody. And who is our audience? Who are we marketing to? And he said, well, we market to people who are suffering. That's pretty inclusive. And I find myself these days saying, as life becomes more beautiful and alive and precious, have you noticed how hard your life is? The first thing the Buddha said is that life is suffering. There's a great deal of suffering from the moment of our birth till our death. And unless we can wake up and have some perspective on that, then it's a pretty damn grim journey. So let's practice, let's wake up, let's learn to love one another, starting with each one of us with ourselves. And sometimes I like to remember this too, that we're not the first people to live on this land. 11,000 years people lived here. And then we're pretty horribly displaced. And sadly, this is not a rarity in the world. This is happening today in several places in the world. So there's not much we can do about the past, but there is something really, I think, the most singularly important thing we can do about the future is to treat our own illnesses of greed, hatred, and ignorance so that we don't ever, even in the smallest way, or at least we can aspire, even in the smallest way, to never harm another human being. Of course, we'll fail, but by golly, we can get better at it. And my talk today actually is a very foundational one in Buddhism, which is about the precepts, the guiding rules for behavior. So, there. Hello, dear friends on Zoom again. I wish you were here. Okay. Oh, the poem. I have a beautiful poem. I have a friend. He's been here a couple of times to PIMC. His name is Hal McCarter. He's 92 years old, and he's a very awakened human being. He often walks from his home up to the Japanese garden. It's a big 600 feet. He's 92. He still walks it. Can't see much. But he sent me this the other day. Extraordinary. I sit in a hut on a rainy day in a Japanese garden. A little fellow learning to walk waddles by. He makes his way navigating the garden path without apparent difficulty. He drops to his knees to negotiate a step. 92 years separate our ages. Our tottering, however, is much the same. Each of us carefully navigating angled paths and irregular steps. Once, I had thought this waddling would be humiliating, but it is so obviously just how life is. I was blind, of course. Here and now, after all, has always been how life is. Looking back, it was mere thought that deceived me. The thought that there was a me separate from the world. A me that authored my thoughts, chose my behavior, composed my life. Was it seeing that there's just this here now that awoke me? Or perhaps the mind took an odd turn to see there was but a single world. Not a divided world of things, but one might call oneness. I, of course, cannot nail down with language a world not divided into things. This is a world of being, where intuition, not words, provide access. I look about and marvel. There really is just this, and how extraordinary it is that I am here experiencing it. I look about and marvel, there really is just this, and how extraordinary it is that I am here experiencing it. So, dear Dharma friends, let's pause. Let's just be here. In the Satipatthana Sutra, the teachings on mindfulness from the Buddha, the basis of this practice, he starts with a person who wants to turn inward, finds a quiet place, sits down comfortably upright, and abandoning covetousness and grief concerning the world, which is an awkward way to say it, and probably the translation is bad. But the meaning of it is abandoning the past and future. One sits comfortably upright, and placing mindfulness before one notices there's a body sitting here. Usually we don't pay attention to the body, we pay attention to what's seen or known or thought. Here we're turning, it's like we're putting the mirror up and looking into it. And, oh yeah, there's a body. And I can feel it. Isn't that wild? Everywhere awareness looks in the body, everywhere it awakens in the body, there's life. Now, of course, we take it for granted, but if we pause that for granted for a few moments, what the hell is going on? This thing's alive. It won't be for long, but it is alive now. And a foundation for it being alive is the fact that it's breathing. And I don't have to breathe it. It breathes itself. And so the simplest form of meditation is remembering there's a body here and it's breathing, and then abiding in the breath when you can. I like to mention this, that not long ago, you were born and you succeeded in taking that first gasping breath. Your lungs inflated, the blueness went out of your skin, and you were alive. Everyone in the room was thrilled. Look, 10 toes, 10 fingers. This has worked. Another human has been born. And so here we are, all these days, months, years later. It still breathes. It didn't stop last night. It will stop sometime. There's a finite number of these breaths. It's a big number, probably. But it breathes. So let's very, 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 very gently come home to the sensations of breathing. Each breath has a beginning. It rises to fullness. It declines, and then it vanishes. And most often I forget to mention the following, which is, for some people, breathing is kind of fraught. People with asthma and all kinds of different things have happened with breathing. So if you're finding you're controlling the breath and struggling with it, don't pay attention there. Pay attention instead to hearing. Hearing, and there are sounds. This voice among them. Of course, the human mind likes to wander. It's part of how it evolved because it's very useful. And it's useful here too because it provides something to notice. The mind will be wandering and it'll just be wandering, unknown, unnoticed. And then miraculously, awareness, heart, mind, fullness springs into being. It's possible then to make a choice. It's a destiny choice. And it's suggested that we let go of that thinking and come home very, 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 very gently to the sensations of in-breathing and out-breathing. That's all. Don't make a war of it. There's plenty of war. Don't even make a battle of it. Just realize that each time awakening happens, you're home. Many or most people on the planet don't really know that their minds wander. They believe they are their thoughts. And thoughts lead us to actions. And as we can see with the polarization in the world, we can fall into ideologies and take them to be real and helpful. And some of them have greed and hatred at their base. Some of them have the individual getting mine as their currency. It's always been like this. But we as individuals can be free. We can wake up. And so when you discover the mind to be wandering, it's in some kind of a trance state. It always is singing the same song of I, me, and mine. It's been very useful to survive as a species. But to survive as a species now, we have to grow up. We have to go beyond the primacy of the individual. And so we, right here, right now, practice as the Buddha discovered. It's possible to be aware of the machinations of the self and to simply step free. So please, let's join together in waking up. And as we come back to the breath again and again, we become more and more intimate with it. We experience its astonishing beauty, its aliveness, its inexplicable sensations. And as it becomes more interesting, it becomes much easier to meditate. It becomes much more an imperative to meditate every day. Why would I not do something that is the most exquisite experience of my day? So we embody ourselves with coming home to in-breathing and out-breathing. Once again, waking up. Sometimes, depending upon our conditioning, we wake up and then there's a conditioned pattern that says, how stupid you are, how inadequate. You let your mind wander again. You should be punished. This is just more wandering mind. It's another trance. About 25 years ago, some Western Dharma teachers, several of them colleagues at this point, went to India to be with the Dalai Lama. He spoke English well, pretty well, not like now. And someone brought up the issue of self-hatred. And he couldn't understand what they were talking about. Went through the translator and back and so on. And finally, he sort of got it and said, do you mean that some of your students have spontaneously arising thoughts of self-hatred? And they said, yes. And he said, have any of you experienced this? And they said, yes. This is an artifact of our culture. Other cultures have different problems. But this is a big one for us. Fortunately, self-hatred is not very deep in us, and it can really be calmed and healed. The Buddha's teachings say that when we stop, when the obscurations stop, when the self-hatred, the 5 hindrances of greed and hatred and restlessness, agitation, and sloth and torpor and doubt, when they stop or are suppressed, what remains is love, compassion, taking delight in the happiness of others and oneself, and equanimity. They're natural, fundamental states. And how could it be that something as simple as noticing the wandering mind and letting go of it and coming home, how could that possibly set us free? It's because freedom is our natural state. So come home. Come home to the simplicity and beauty of your breath, this breath. And changing gears, changing the channel. Please remember someone in this lifetime who has really loved you. There's been somebody. I often think of my 5th grade teacher, Mrs. McLagan, or my Boy Scout leader, Mr. Gourlay. There's been someone, or maybe you could just remember being with your blessed cat and entering into a state of reverie, or holding a baby. You have been loved, and you are love. You're capable of loving. Think a kind thought, appreciative thought about the person who sits here. You're very capable of thinking lots of critical statements, but this is a different thing. This is I love you. Or, wow, the fact that you're still alive is astonishing. Or, I'll always be with you. What is it? What is it you've always wanted to hear? Let your synapses circle on that for a bit. And the mind may well wander. There might be some argument. Doesn't matter. We're setting a course. And please now, embrace the whole body. Let the whole body sing to you. You may have some chronic pain. I do. You might love it too. Acknowledge it. Notice the life in your hands, in your face, in your eyes, in your lips, cheeks, your tongue in your mouth. And now notice the prompted intention in the mind to open the eyes. And then notice how you operationalize that. How do you do that? How do you prepare to and then open your eyes? And then what happens? It's happened a million times, probably more. Notice how objects appear, how colors appear, forms. Seeing happens. But this is a different kind of seeing. This is seeing with mindfulness. Seeing with wakefulness. And now, to the degree that you want to and it's comfortable, I invite you to turn and meet each other. If you're close enough to touch hands, great, but just to look around and see who's here. See yourself in your many forms. And those of you on Zoom can do the same on Zoom very easily. And I seem to be being very direct today, so I'm going to say this. When you meet someone's eyes, remember that they are going to die. Now that's powerful. I had a teacher in San Francisco many years ago, long dead now, Rina Sirkar, very famous Burmese master. Actually, she was from Bengal, trained in Burma. She would do something like that or remind us about how hard it's been. And then she would get quiet for a moment and say, remembering this, how can we be anything but loving? Right? Every single one of us, we're visitors here. We're here on an educational adventure. And of course, the topics are, how loving can you be? How painful is hatred? How bizarre is it that we hold prejudices against each other because of, oh, we have a nice list. I want to read it. We welcome everyone. Our DEI committee created this. We study together and practice for the benefit of all beings and this living earth. We recognize the suffering caused by biases, prejudices, systems of power, privilege, and oppression based on race, sex, class, age, ethnicity, religion, national origin, ability, sexual orientation, and gender identity or expression. Good God, we're crazy, right? We can find something. We aspire to do no harm and to dismantle barriers that cause separation and suffering, recognizing that our liberation is interconnected with all beings. Wow, that's pretty thorough. I have a few announcements. In fact, I have more than a few. I have a plethora. I'm going to start with this. Oh, that's not it. Hang on. Where is it? Nah, one of these. Oh, there. No, that's not it. There she is. So this is Candle Summers. She's one of our esteemed teachers. And share to Zoom. Thank you. Yay. See how good he is? Here it is. Candle Summers. Ladies and gentlemen, Candle Summers. Boom. Look, it worked. Oh, go back. Turn off. That's fine. There we are. How did you like that? Can you translate that? All right, now I'm going to go forwards.
Greetings, my Dhamma friends.
Oh, you can't.
I wanted to mention to you about women's restoration and rejuvenation.
Can I do
Robert
that?
had asked me in our last teachers meeting if I wanted to say anything about it, because this is our last.
Hang on. What am I doing? Pull out. Oh, my audio is in here. Help. Come here. I'm anxious all of a sudden. I can't think.
This and that and this and that.
So
Okay, so you're gonna play it from the computer, so yeah, I'm gonna take it out.
what if I just took this and played it from? Would that work? I think that would work. Okay.
Now, before you put it in there, I want you to go into Zoom and disconnect from audio.
I think I am.
No, because you logged back in. I don't know if you-
Oh, okay. Where?
At the top on the left.
Audio.
Down arrow. Leave audio. Leave computer audio. Please.
Okay. That it?
Perfect. Yeah. That is.
But I can plug this in. There's going to be a pop. I'll do it quickly though. All right. God, that's great. I got so anxious I couldn't think. Isn't that weird? It's like a life and death situation. I'm going to die if this doesn't work. Oh, now we go back to Zoom, right? How do I get Zoom back? Is it okay? I shared it well, properly. All right, here we go. All right. Oh, rewind. Thank you. I like that. It's okay. Here we go. Oh, okay.
Greetings, my Dhamma friends. I wanted to mention to you about women's restoration and rejuvenation. Robert had asked me in our last teachers meeting if I wanted to say anything about it, because this is our last session for this year. It starts on the third Friday of September and goes through December at 6:30 in the evening on Zoom only. And it's a monthly group for self-identified women. Many of you have come to this over the last 2 years that I've been hosting it. We come together and reflect and inspire each other on our path to liberation. We have a half an hour of meditation, and then we each have 5 or 6 minutes each, depending on how many are in the group. It's limited to the first 16 who sign up. And we share our love for the Dharma through readings that have influenced us. There's time for silent meditation and individual sharing. It has proven to be a lifeline for some of the people who have come. And we look forward with open arms to having anyone else sign up who hasn't been before, experienced or inexperienced in women's circles. Happy to have you join us. All right. Thanks so much for listening. See you soon, I hope.
Kendall Summers has spent her entire adult life pursuing the Dharma, practicing. She trained for 25 years or so with Kamala Masters and Steve Armstrong in Maui. And so she has quite a depth of being and worth visiting. Now, worth working with. I have one more. This. Share. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. We have a magnificent website. Derek Whitliff remodeled it completely and manages it. Can I get this bigger? I don't know. Can I get rid of this? Yes. Boom. So here is a quick tour through coming attractions. Tonight, it's, oh dear, I forget her name, but there's Basics of Mindfulness coming up as a class with Doug Pullen. You can just go to PIMC website and see these two. Women's Restoration and Rejuvenation, which Kendall just spoke about. The Heart of Awakening, Doug Pullen, a deeper dive into the Dharma. The Autumn Equinox, Meditation, Movement, and Sound Healing with Kendall and, I forget, Phyllis, there it is. As soon as I begin to miss a name, the anxiety builds up so much, there's no way I can get the name. It's like, it's crazy. Qigong, we'll have a bit of this with Jim very soon. A day-long retreat on October the 5th, tomorrow and a half. And this is my dear friend Don McEachern and I will be in the Bethlehem Retreat Center in Nanaimo, British Columbia, November 4 through 12. Before that, I have a retreat at Brighton Bush Hot Springs, which is almost full. It's 5 days. All right.
Excuse me, but you missed the first one that was up there, that tonight is Candles First and Third with Aya Viriani, the specialist in metta. It was on the screen and then it just went by.
Oh, yes. I've got to, yeah, this, I'm going to try to attend this myself. Here we are. Sunday, this is tonight, 6:30. You can find the link on the website. Venerable Aya Viriani, who lives in Europe, I believe, who's doing a third evening with PIMC, and she's been devoting her practice to loving kindness for a long, long time. So tune in. Oh, golly, I do have announcements. I'm going to do this very briefly. This was my bowl in Burma. Jeez, 45 years ago. No wonder it's kind of beat up. Anyway, it's a symbol. It's a symbol of the practice of dana, the practice of opening our frightened hands and giving. And PIMC exists on your dana. We don't have a membership charge because we don't have a membership. That was by design way back in 1990 when we incorporated. Jim Dalton was there. We decided that we wouldn't have a membership because so many people who come here are kind of fleeing from religious organizations. This is not a religious organization. They're fleeing because of the pressure put on them. And this is all by invitation. And so you can support PIMC by putting some money in here or an apple, And back there, there's a wooden box. And you can also go online and make a donation. And any donation is worth making, because the smallest donation opens the heart. And if you happen to have lots of money, we could use a lot. We're kind of skimping. We're just getting by. Well, better than that. And the best thing is to make a monthly contribution, because then it remembers, the bank remembers when you forget. That was pretty good. Short. Oh, right. I've never announced that. You could use the QR code right now. Huh? Is I don't, yeah, I think we are in Venmo. Okay, that was a lot, Robert. Jim Dalton, would you be so kind as to share some mindful movement? And remember not to leave.
Testing, it's coming through. Okay. So I'd like to reinforce that invitation to a day of Qigong practice on October 5th. Let's get in touch with our feet. And on October 5th, we won't have as many pillows in the middle of the room, so we'll do some more choreographed movement. But I have this little triangle that I can stand on here. What's going on? For some reason, this microphone doesn't. Oh, I know what it is. I have this little string around my glasses, so I don't have to spend half my day looking for where my glasses are. Okay. So this is the traditional stance of hip width apart, toes pointed forward, knees bent, shoulders relaxed, sinking and lifting. For every movement, there's a counter movement. Everything that rises returns to rest. So what we'll do on the 5th of October is 15 or 20 minutes of different gestures like this that have a beginning and a journey and then a return to home. And while we're moving the rib cage as we breathe, while we're moving the arms and the knee joints and shoulders, there's energy stimulated through all these different channels, these meridians they're called. And there's a whole system of, well, it's a checklist, making sure we get all the channels stimulated. So there's healthy new energy flowing through the entire system. And it's been practiced for hundreds of years, probably thousands of years in Eastern countries, mostly China. With the idea that we can soften the stagnation in our bodies, because we're under attack all the time with stressful events, some from the outside and some created by our own minds. But the stress builds up in little stagnant pockets, and then we have to make a deliberate attempt to release, softening, bringing gentle love to each joint. And if we can't remember the whole system, we have these little perceptive images. This one is like a water wheel, an old-fashioned mill on a spring or a fed stream and little creek. So then we reach up and cross the midline and stimulate deeper into the organs and the nervous system. By crossing the midline, we trigger all kinds of flows. Behind the organs, underneath, from above. And there are many organs of filtering. We kind of squeeze them out. Look at the moon through the window. We have a perception of a window and a frame. And that in order to create that, we're squeezing out the liver and the spleen and the filtering system, getting rid of some of that toxicity. Pressing across, this brings engagement into one leg. We have weight away from the center of gravity, so the leg engages and all of the meridian points at the bottoms of the feet get stimulated for the whole body. There's 6 major ones on the right foot and 6 on the left. And then we move to a gesture called cloud hands that I learned through the perception of the image of a cloud drifting across the sky with the shadow integrated into the movement with the lower hand, one in touch with the earth, one in touch with the heavens. But recently, I discovered that what's really happening, or what's also happening, I guess, is that we're absorbing from the earth and then we're radiating to the heart. We're creating a circuit from all the chi in the earth into the heart that's been broken and disappointed and grieving. It needs replenishment all the time. And then stepping out, move this energy all through the body, from the bottoms of the feet to the crown of the head. And you can't get there without going through the heart. And then taking a big breath and riding the waves. We clean out the lungs, new energy in on the inhale, out. And then another image of a pigeon airing out its wings. It's been huddled down, protected from the cold and the damp all night, and the sun comes up, and then the pigeon opens its wings. So these images, these perceptive images, help us remember a sequence till we get all the joints going, all the channels of energy open and fluid and relaxed. Riding the waves, breathe in and out. And remembering the pigeon opening its wings, palms up, palms down. Okay, and then coming back to our traditional stance with the feet hip width apart, make a fist and let the dragon rise from the sea. Stretching up the back, across the rib cage. Spreading our wings, flying with the cranes up on the toes. And then just integrating all the different things. Open your stance and turn a huge wheel. Get everything's moving at once in a nice fluid release of toxins all through the body. Go the other way. Then back to the center. Lift one hand and one knee. Work on our balance, physical balance, emotional balance, mental balance, fluid, responding to the ever-changing world. And then breathe in new energy, release all the toxins. So if you come on the 5th of October, we'll do gestures like this and then sit for a while and watch the life unfold in a rejuvenated body. And then we'll have some Dharma exchanges with poetry and short Dharma talks. So that's 3 Saturdays from now, I think. Thank you very much. Warm things up.
in 1981. In 1979, I took a group of Lewis and Clark students with my first wife to India for 5 months, which is absurd. Two 27-year-olds pretending they're adults taking 21 and 20 and 19-year-old to India for 5 months. It was quite crazy. However, we got to go to Burma for a week with Tangpulu Sayadaw, a very famous, great master. And that's the context in which he came to Palo Alto and spent 2 months or 3 months there with a group of monks. And we went to visit just to pay our respects. Quick trip down. And while we were there, there was a moment when I was alone in the kitchen, and a woman came in who had a very strong Prussian accent. And we talked, and she had a bee sting. And I, at that time, fancied myself quite a body worker and healer. And so I offered her to work on her arm, and it was nice. And then we got to the point of sharing names, and she said, I'm Ruth Dennison. And I'd heard of her as one of the 3 Westerners that U Ba Khin of Burma had authorized to teach. And we talked for a while. And then we went to her camper van where she made tea for me and where we talked for 6 hours. And then she was my teacher and great friend for 42 years. I was present when she died. Myself and my wife Jennifer and one other woman in the middle of the night. Her last 20 minutes were, it was like her breath was diminishing by 0.5%, less than that, each breath. It's like getting shorter. Quiet though, just quiet, quiet, quiet. And then she breathed out and didn't breathe in. And there were no emergencies of rainbow bodies, and it was just an ordinary human death of an extraordinary person. We then kept her body for a day. I had bought 20 pounds of dry ice. And we sang and cried, and it was quite beautiful. And if you look, I invite you to look sometime coming into the hall, or when you're leaving, look back. There's a little plaque there along the top. And in 1990, she gave me the first check for $10,000, of which there were many more. She said, start a center. And I said, I don't know how to do that. And she said, you'll figure it out. And she said, I considered giving you this money DOD, which means delivery on death. But I thought I wanted to see my name on something. So the plaque out there is the Ruth Dennison Dhammadina, which is her Buddhist name, meditation hall. You're in her hall. It's actually our hall. This is a nonprofit, so we all own it. It's yours. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about her before I began this talk, because without her, I was already teaching when I met her, but without her, my teaching would have been insipid and narrow and not very alive. I'll do one other thing. We have a little of her leftovers in this Thai thing, are some of her cremains. And I invite you, feel free. You're allowed to come up here. I remember in the Catholic Church, would you ever go up there? Ah! You'd be electrocuted somehow. In here, there's a piece of bone. I don't know, it's a big piece. And she would be delighted to know that I'm showing this to you. Not only because she loved being the center of attention, but because it would be reminding us all of the reality that we're here for such a short time. Okay. What have I got? Oh, 20 minutes, 40 minutes. Let's set my timer. There. I've given this talk 100 times, but not this talk. I've spoken of this topic 100 times. That's probably exaggerating, 70. It is a privilege beyond description to sit in this seat and to speak about the Dharma with you, at you. I've had a lot of fine teachers. For about 10 years, I really wanted to be Jack Kornfield, at least as good as Jack Kornfield. When I prepared my first Eightfold Path talk, I listened to his Eightfold Path talk, and I got a little device for my cassette recorder. I got a little device that I could turn it on and off, and I made notes through the whole thing. And then it was about 10 years of Joseph Goldstein. And those were worthy practices, because they are worthy human beings. If you've not read Mindfulness by Joseph Goldstein, that's something to listen to. And there are talks online. Each section is, he gave a talk. He gave these talks over 3 years to meditators who were practicing for at least 6 months in the Forest Hermitage in Massachusetts. And so they had to be very clear talks. So he did that. He gave the talks. He then wrote a book from them. And you can listen to the talk and then go to the book. So I don't want to get lost in that, because I could. I said before that this is not a religious place. It's not. There is nothing to believe here. There's a map, and there are descriptions of reality that are intended to be tried and tested, and that the methodology is try it, see if it leads, see if it conduces toward a diminution of your greed, hatred, and ignorance. And does it lead to your happiness? Number 2, does it conduce to the diminution of greed, hatred, and ignorance in your loved ones? Does it lead to their being more happy, suffering less? 3rd, if it conduces toward the happiness of all beings, leading to the diminution of their greed, hatred, and ignorance, then it's a worthy practice. So you can't be particularly, what's the word? There's no short blind belief answer, because there isn't. But there is a model and a way of thinking and being in the world that, in my experience, works. It's not fast. In fact, it takes a lifetime, but the fruits are quite quick. I've taught many, many people to meditate, and I say, commonly I say, sit for 20 minutes a day for a month or two and see how it changes you. And almost everyone that I've gotten to talk with afterwards came back and said something like, I've talked to my mother every Sunday for 5 years or 7 years, and I hate those calls because, she's so rigid and they always go down the same tube. And then the person comes back and says, I don't know what the hell happened last week, but I just decided I would listen to my mother. And I saw the point when I would say this that I usually say, and then I didn't, but I just listened. And by the end of the conversation, we'd had quite a different conversation. That's pretty dramatic, but that happens all the time, that kind of thing. Okay, the map. I think I have them up here. Boom, boom, share, boom. Miss me, go away. All right. I'm going to just read through these. Could make them bigger, I think. Are they readable? Big enough? Okay. Adina dana veramani sika padam samadhiyami musawada veramani sika padam samadhiyami, and so on for 3 more. These are linchpins in our happiness and in the well-being of all beings. They're called the precepts, the moral guiding code of the Theravada Buddhist world. We have the 10 Commandments. In Islam, every religion has guidelines of this is how you get along with each other. This is how your meditation practice can actually open up into the reality of life. And we have to develop these, and every culture does, because I invite you to look at your hand for a minute and let it become a monkey hand. We are animals. We're born, we die. And we have had to struggle tooth and nail to survive over the period of our evolution. We've had to learn how to fight to the death. And it's a long time ago I noticed, but nature movies, when they're at all realistic, are really damn grim. There's always somebody tearing someone else's head off. And that's the way it is. How is it that we shift out of that and become human? Well, we figured out some pieces of that. One of my favorite factoids from a little book called History of Civilization. For 99.96% of our time in this human brain, this highly developed one, we lived in small hunting and gathering bands of 50 or so. And the oldest among us were 30, 40, and the oldest bones that we found, they've always been broken and injured. It was hard. And then for the last 0.01% of our time on the planet, in what we call civilization, we've become, quote, civilized. This is Mesopotamia. We've had crops, we've learned how to stop killing each other sometimes. We're coming through a period of one of the periods of the least killing on the earth that there's been. Because we've learned how somebody once said to me not long ago, well, if you don't think we're getting anywhere on supporting women to be cared for and be safe, a woman can now travel from one coast to the other and over most of Europe and many places in the world. A woman can be alone and not be attacked. It's brand new. Now, it's not fast enough, but it's changing. So I better get to the precepts, or I'm not going to have any time. So we have rules. And the rules in this case they weren't handed down by God. They were developed by human beings. And they're intended as consciousness-raising devices. Because the truth is, when we don't follow the precepts, we hurt each other. And when we hurt each other, we don't feel good. I haven't worked with a lot of veterans, but I have had a few over the years, my psychotherapy practice and meditation. And several said to me, it was really bad seeing my buddy killed beside me. But what I lose sleep over is that Viet Cong man that I shot in the head. Because the killing disturbs us really. It breaks the rules. So, these rules are intended for our well-being, and they're not intended to be, except maybe when we treat our children, they're not to be memorized and I will follow this rule. They're used as learning devices. So, this is a translation. I undertake the training of the heart to refrain from taking the life of any living being, and the positive statement is implicit in it, but I wrote these 25 or 30 years ago, so the positive statement was spoken. I aspire to become kind and of service to all beings. I undertake the training of the heart to refrain from taking that which is not freely given. I aspire to become generous to all beings. I undertake the training of the heart to refrain from sexual acts which cause harm. I aspire to nurture love, relationship, and beauty, and art. I undertake the training of the heart to refrain from false and harmful speech. I aspire to use speech to create happiness, connection, harmony, and understanding. I undertake the training of the heart to refrain from the use of intoxicants that dull the mind. I aspire to cultivate mindfulness and wisdom. I'm going to go through them one at a time, and I wish I had an hour and a half, but I will do what I can. There's a great teacher on the earth, he's still alive, Achan Semedo, who gave a talk on this and said, you know, we could simplify this and say just, I will not and will do my best to not allow kill human beings. The world would be a totally different place. And then one way I think of this is I really want to minimize the killing I'm involved in. There's a little story on my website, robertbeatty.com, which is worth going to because there's podcasts and all kinds of things. There's a little story called Killing Ratty, which I won't tell here, but we discovered there were rats in our home. And I said, well, we can live with them. And then one ran across my daughter's foot in her bedroom. And we decided, oh, I have to do something. And I wound up buying a rat zapper, the most humane way of killing rats. And the story is about how I became a somewhat wanton rat killer. The first one was hard, really hard. I took it out and I studied it, and it was, you know, we'd had all those mice and stuff like that. They're no different from the mice, except they're rats. Anyway, that's a worthy thing about learning how to kill, but not becoming, what's the word, insensitive to it. I aspire to become kind and of service to all beings. We have a very strong pull in us to be of service to each other, which the Dalai Lama said, the kind actions of people and the movement toward kindness is so overwhelming on the earth that they have to focus the news on the wars and the bad stuff because nothing will sell otherwise. But you think about it. How many times have you stopped to help somebody? How many times has someone stopped to help you? I've traveled a lot in my life, and funny this comes to mind. My girlfriend Liz was still a good friend. We were together for 7 years. We traveled east to Asia together overland. We lived in Switzerland for 2 years. We were hitchhiking back. We came through, we walked across Liechtenstein. And then our first ride in Switzerland, the fellow said, where are you going? And we said, you know, we're going to Andermatt. And to get to Andermatt, you have to take the train and then a cogwheel and so on. And he was going to Basel, quite a different part of the country. And he took us to the train station and bought our tickets. I had that kind of thing happen 100 times, more probably. Hitchhiking down the west coast of, well, anywhere in New Zealand back then. There's no way I could put up my tent because the last ride of the day would say, well, you're coming home with me tonight. I want my children to meet you. And that happens a lot. My daughter and I spent 18 days in Turkey, and we had, such good experiences. But in 2 occasions, the owner of the restaurant insisted on paying for our dinner. Kindness, it's all over the place. And we can cultivate it. We can have that top of mind to, I want to be kind today. And of course, kindness starts with oneself. And we can have conditioning such that we're not kind to ourselves. You know, we think we deserve to be punished, or we deserve to not have our needs met, or so. And this isn't to become or glorify codependency. That you, when I talk about this, I think often of women, but it's true for most people who come on meditation retreats. We need to take better care of ourselves because we were conditioned in childhood to think, or many of us, I certainly have this, which is, I'm going to be as good as I can and help as much as I can and be as nice to my mommy and daddy as I can, because maybe then they won't be sick and drink. And maybe there will be a little love left over for me. That's not what I'm suggesting here. I'm suggesting that we take care of ourselves, fill our cup, and then the moments of kindness that we can offer, they're right in front of us all the time. Number 2, I undertake the training of the heart to refrain from taking that which is not freely given. If we steal from each other, we're not safe. If we steal, here's a fun one. If we cheat on our taxes, there's a little fear. What if I get audited? That little fear is expensive. I did a little survey early on in my private practice. I didn't report cash. How sensible. But then a fellow came to see me, and he came 20 or 30 times, but he never wanted to give me his address I had this moment when I thought, oh my God, he's a plant from the IRS and they're going to get me, because I had my 2 sets of books. And then I went to my bookkeeping, and it turned out that I saved, I guess, maybe $800 a year in taxes. What the hell? Why put up with that anxiety? So pretty straightforward, that one. And when we do steal something, we notice later, I stole a salad in graduate school in Toronto. I'd never stolen anything. I was very upright. And I stole a salad, and I felt great. And then I was a monk on retreat in India 4 years later, and that damn salad came in, and I struggled with it for days. And when I went back to Toronto, I paid for my salad. Now, I've done worse things than that, of course, but it's interesting because each one leaves a little mark on the heart. I undertake the training of the heart to refrain from sexual acts which cause harm. I aspire to nurture love, relationship, and beauty. Back to that survival thing. Sexual desire is a profound force. It's kind of like the binding force in the nucleus of the atom. You know, when you blow that apart, you have a nuclear weapon. Human sexuality it's the prime directive. It's reproduce. And so it's no wonder that we go off the deep end and create a lot of harm. And you don't have to do this, but I'm going to ask you to participate. Please raise your hand if you have ever gone crazy and done quite a bit of harm through acts of sexual contact. Why did you do that? You didn't have much choice. If you have the precepts, you've got another layer of help, choice. We wear wedding rings for a good reason. It's part of how we try to control this thing. I aspire to nurture love, relationship, and beauty. I aspire to become a really loving person, right? Don't you? And I aspire that we have this possibility of sexuality, sensuality. And I aspire, the short way to put this is, for those of us who are actually being sexual or might be sexual, I really would like to make love rather than get laid or something like that. Because you probably know, you likely know what it's like when love is there and one is acting with that. It's one of the beautiful gifts of being human. I undertake the training of the heart to refrain from false and harmful speech. I aspire to use speech to create happiness, connection, harmony, and understanding. There's a couple of times in my life where I made a real mess by lying. Two examples of the difficulty of lying. Many years ago, my daughter Tara moved back to Portland. She lives here now. And she needed a car. And so Jennifer and I surreptitiously bought her a car, and she was living with us. And how the hell do we keep it? I had to lie about 10 or 15 times. It was crazy. And it was such a relief to finally have her go in and be shocked and not have to lie anymore. But I've lied on a couple of occasions that really caused harm. So it's really worth paying attention to that. And I aspire to use speech to create happiness, connection, harmony, and understanding. I'd like to introduce you, if you've not already been introduced, to Marshall Rosenberg, the creator of a form of consciousness development and communication called nonviolent communication. Even reading the book or watching an hour-long video, you'll get a sense of how we can work with our speech to actually help things. In conflict, I don't speak nonviolent communication fluently. I've had quite a lot of training, even with Marshall, but I am pretty good at what's called, it's like, you know, there's colloquial German and there's high German, and same in French, sort of. And I can speak high nonviolent communication pretty well. It's like, okay, what do I start with? Aha, this is what I hear you saying. I don't know if it's what you said, but this is what I'm hearing you saying. And these are the feelings that arose in my body, in my being, in response to what you said. And funny, I'm forgetting number 3. How strange. Anyway, and the last thing is a request, and I'd like to make a request of you in this present moment. And the way it cuts through misunderstanding, simply paraphrasing. I was in graduate school when I ran into an interpersonal communication first, a guy called Bob Mark. And the notion that one could, in conflict, or even not, say, oh, this is what I'm hearing you saying, am I right? And so often, it's completely off. Back 15 years ago, I did couples therapy for a couple of years, which was not wise, because I was not well enough trained. But I learned a lot, and I did some good, but and some harm. I'd be in the room, and this say an angry couple, and he would say A, B, C, D, and she would respond as though she'd heard Q, W, X, D, and then he would respond as though he'd heard, and they were not having a conversation. They were not hearing at all what the other person was saying. Now, you've all been there. And so if you stop and say, what I'm hearing is this, and you can ask the other person, and then they'll tell you something. No, that's not at all what I'm trying to say. And then you say, well, can you try again? I'm having trouble getting it. Changes everything. I undertake the training of the heart to refrain from the use of intoxicants. I aspire to cultivate mindfulness and wisdom. On my father's side, there were 6 children and 6 alcoholics. On my mother's side, there were 7 children and 7 alcoholics. Not an uncommon story. If I had not run into the Dharma, I would not be sitting here. And it's been a lifelong procession change of reducing the dependence upon substances. I still do sometimes. And I often wonder, why am I doing this? Well, because I want this altered state. Or alcohol is a great example. If I have a glass of wine at night, my meditation in the morning is very blurry, because alcohol is a neurotoxin. And yet, sometimes I'll do that, and something happens in conversations that's kind of special or whatever. And the same with the other substances. What about LSD? What about ecstasy? What about marijuana? How helpful is it? It may be at times supremely helpful, in which case it's become medicine. What about mushrooms used in sacred ceremonies for thousands of years? So this is a consciousness raising tool, which is, am I coming home every night after work and having a glass or two of wine every night? Or is there some boundary? There's some limit on the way I'll use that. Or when there's tension at home, do I go out back and get a little THC in my system so I can tolerate the discomfort in my marriage or friendship? So it's not straightforward. Well, it is straightforward, but it's like, let's pay attention. How am I altering my state? And does the altering of state that I'm doing really help me and the people around me? Oh, and I meant to start with this. Why do we use substances? Because life is so damn hard. And scary. Right? If we pull down the barrier for just a moment, the Western allies, our pals, look like they're giving the Ukrainians the go-ahead to use long-range missiles into Russia. It could be World War III in a minute. We have an election coming, which could be the end of our blessed experiment. The craziest of all. We have children and fall in love with people and really care about them. But with the children, there's a simple way to put it. We take a piece of our heart and we stick legs and arms on it and a head. And we say, okay, we train them for years. And then we say, have a good life. And there is absolutely no predicting what's going to happen with them. I'm at my age cohort. I know lots of parents who have observed their children go through tragic situations, and they're heartbroken. Which, of course, then provides an opportunity to practice the Dharma and learn about the ways of the world. But between here and my home, and there may be more, without going off my route, there are 6 marijuana shops. I presumed some of them would go out of business. They're flourishing. And during COVID, marijuana usage, legal marijuana usage in Oregon went up by 70%. During COVID, alcohol consumption went up by 100%. Why? Because we were hurting. So the Dharma encourages us, be conscious of how we're doing that. And then we can modulate, we can be careful. And we can move in the direction of greater and greater consciousness. Doing okay. I undertake the training of the heart to refrain from taking that which is not freely given. I undertake the training of the heart to refrain from sexual acts which cause harm. Oh, I forgot something. I'll come back here. I undertake the training of the heart to refrain from false and harmful speech. I undertake the training of the heart to refrain from the use of intoxicants. I'm going to go up here. I forgot. I aspire to become generous to all beings. We live in a playground of possibilities to be generous. We can be generous to ourselves, a good place to begin, the right place to begin. We can be generous with our loved ones. And I like to practice particularly being generous with that fellow or woman standing outside 7-Eleven who doesn't have any money and is strung out on something and is hungry. I really delight in going up to them and saying, is there anything you want in there that I can get for you? Sometimes they've been forbidden to go in the store. They're not begging. They're just standing there and suffering. And it's so easy to buy them a hot dog or two and some cheese. And yes, I buy them alcohol if that's what they're wanting. I've done that 100 times, more. My daughter and her partner gave me a fantastic gift at Christmas. They gave me 24-gallon plastic bags. Each one had a $10 bill in it and some food, some, a meal and so on, and some candy, a little candy, and a copy of the poem by Mary Oliver called Wild Geese. And they were all gone quick. It was very helpful because I could keep change in my wallet, or I could keep money in my wallet. But there was one fellow who was very strung out, and I gave it to him on my way in. And as I came out, I saw he was sitting there reading Wild Geese. Incredible poem. And I went back to my car and I watched him. It looked like he read it 2 or 3 times. Tell me about, what is it? Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the wild geese are flying home again, over and over repeating your place in the family of things. And there's any number of things like that we can do. We can give to charity. We can give to PIMC. It's actually a very pleasant, and that's the other reason for doing giving, practicing giving. It's so pleasant to do this because it takes us to the place of I'm connected with you, which is really true. We're not separate at that level. So, I think I'm going to stop there and see if there's anyone here or at home that would like to make a comment or question. So it's a little more interactive than my going on and on. Where is it? I lost Zoom. Oh, there's my crow. I have a tame crow. He's 3 now. Comes every morning and he'll sit on the hot tub lid and scream at me if I haven't fed him yet. What did I do? Oh, I got to stop sharing. Duh. It was good. Okay. Any question, comment? Please come take Mike, Tamara. I know you hate it, but
No, should be quiet.
you're on. It's on.
I'm going back. It's always
A little closer.
it always jumps out at me that these and some other things of the Buddha teaching follow like the 10 Commandments. And I know that it's probably not helpful to like try to string all this together, but I find it helpful because I did come from a religious background. And it helps me make sense of things that became very punitive later, very judgmental, and you're going to hell if you break these. And instead of how it impacts and creates our experience here. So I don't know if you want to say anything. I don't know if anybody's ever, I'm sure somebody's come along and made those distinctions before. And I'm curious what you have to say about that.
You mean between, for instance, the 10 Commandments of one's childhood and the precepts? Like how you?
Yeah, I mean, it came after. It came after all of this. And then who it was really linked to is always in question, the 10 Commandments. And so I'm curious what you have heard along the way about people kind of making that distinction, or if those perhaps flowed from this somehow.
You mean how the 10 Commandments flowed from the 5 precepts?
Well, connected with in some way. They just seem some of them at least seem very.
They're always dealing with the same problem. Human beings.
Sure.
And human beings steal and lie and have inappropriate sex. And
right.
I don't know. I've never thought of how to compare and contrast or something. Well, I of course am very deeply steeped in Buddhism, And I love these precepts. And for me, compared to the 10 Commandments, they're leagues ahead because they're consciousness raised. They're not saying you're going to go to hell. They are saying, well, you're responsible. You're responsible and you will receive the fruits of your karma. So out of enlightened self-interest, why not take care of yourself? So, that help at all?
Yeah, I mean, that's the way I see them too. I just didn't know if there was any like historical connection to them at all. I know we're all dealing with the same thing and all, but.
Well, there are stories that Jesus went to Kashmir. He didn't have to go to Kashmir. There were Buddhist monks in the Middle East. There's a great book called The Rise of the West that speaks eloquently of the Silk Road and the ideas going back and forth across the route. I mean, I followed the Silk Road on buses, and people on camels followed the Silk Road, so when an idea breaks out, like compassion, it has tended to flow across the bridge and be all of a sudden there's the Buddha, Zoroaster, Jesus, Mahavir. There's this idea, and well, I got to stop here momentarily, but there is a terrible, terrible tragedy happening right now because people believe that it's wise to follow the ancient rule of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And we will attack back. We will kill as many people as you did, or 100 times more. It's a human sickness. And there it is in one of the holy books, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Well, it's an ancient teaching before we realized about compassion. I mean, compassion is, for many people, compassion is a really wild concept, right? If someone attacks me, I want to be compassionate with them. And I want to restrain the part of me that wants revenge, because there will be a part of me that wants revenge. And there are so many beautiful stories of people who didn't go for revenge. I'm going to tell one little story and then I'll stop. The Beals, I forget their first names. Friends of mine, well, it doesn't matter where it came from. The Beals had a beautiful little girl daughter. And she was young, teenager, I think. And this is in South Africa, a group of 3 young men took her, raped her, and killed her. And they were caught. And they're in prison. And Mrs. Beale started visiting them. And she visited them for a long time. And then she asked for 2 of them to be released to her. And they started together anti-rape programs all over South Africa. And one of these young men in the conversations after he said, why did you do this? And she said, well, at first, when I came to see you in prison, I wanted you dead. But then I realized I didn't want you dead. It was the part of you that could do that heinous act with my daughter that I wanted dead. And then I realized that you could really help me and that we could really help each other avoid a bunch of rapes. And I knew Mr. Beale had died by the time I heard about this, and they attended a conference, a psychotherapy conference in New York City, where there were 4,000 people. And there's all kinds of stories like that of people who remain profoundly human in the midst of completely dehumanizing circumstances. And what is it about them that does that? I have no idea. I will indulge myself. In one of the catastrophes, I can't remember which one, in Africa, where one group, Hutu Tutsi, I think, one group came in and just wiped out the other side with machetes. And this woman hid under a bathtub and watched her children killed. And she became an incredible force for peace. Whatever happened there transformed her heart into, she didn't want this happening anywhere else. Wish I could remember her name. But she's just one of thousands. This does happen a lot. I mean, comparatively not a lot, but it is possible for us to become really loving human beings. Doesn't mean we'll be perfect, right? We'll still blow it, but okay. Thank you for listening. Thank you a lot for listening. What do I want to do? Let's close by chanting the dial tone of the universe together for a minute. Om. And let's feel it in our hearts. And then after that, I'll ring the bell. And I invite you to stand up and greet 1 or 2 or 10 people. And if you want to know something to say, you could say, thank you, go in peace. Or glad you're here, or whatever. Okay? Not compulsory. Om. 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 Music. Well, thank you, dear friends. Thank you for coming. And be nice to yourselves, really.